Welcome to the Salt Lake City Planning Commission meeting on May 14th, 2025. I want you to note the public meeting rules are posted at the entrance to this room, or they're in Section D of the Planning Commission Policies and Procedures, which is available on the Salt Lake City Planning Department website. We've received comments that you've submitted to your planner or your community organization prior to this meeting. If you want to make a comment tonight, please fill out a comment card, which are found near the entrance to this room, or you can send an email to planning.commission@slc.gov. Now is the time for the report of the chair. I want to congratulate the vice chair, Landon Krasik, recently graduated from U of U with a master's degree in city and metropolitan planning with an emphasis in urban design. So congratulations. That's pretty great.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks.
So that's the end of my report. It's now your turn, Mr. Krasik.
I have nothing to report as vice chair.
Now it's time for the report of the planning director.
Hello. One thing is I have changed my last name, so please refer to Bell. It's pronounced Bell. And the mixed-use consolidation had a May 6th hearing with the council, and they have continued the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now it's time for an open forum where commissioners can discuss planning, zoning, or general land use items not listed on the agenda. Do you have anything to discuss? No? Okay, thank you. The next item on our agenda is the consent agenda, which these are items that we anticipate will require limited discussion. We have two items on the consent agenda today. Number one is a planned development at approximately 1518 South Main Street. And number two is approval of the meeting minutes for April 23rd, 2025. The outcome this evening that we can have is approval of all those items or to move some onto the regular agenda. I'm going to open the public hearing for the planned development at approximately 1518 South Main Street. Is there anyone here who'd like to speak on that item? If you would, please go to the podium. I don't know why it's... We're just getting the microphone for the public comment set up. Just a second.
We have another hearing coming up.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Okay, you can you can approach the microphone. Are you speaking as the organized community organization for this property?
Thank you. Yes, I am.
Okay, you'll have 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Amy J. Hawkins. I serve as the chair of the Ballpark Community Council, in which this plan development is being proposed. This project has shifted considerably, and the narrative has quite a few inconsistencies, and I raise this not to be nitpicky, but because they make the difference in whether or not the community would overwhelmingly support the project. So we would love to have this addressed. For example, on page 18 of the staff report, in the applicant narrative under plan development objectives, the applicant states that, quote, the project is designed in compliance with the guidelines and recommendations outlined in the master plan by providing affordable options for housing ownership near the downtown core of Salt Lake City. The project will generate a sense of place for tenants and their guests, I think they mean guests, as well as shoppers and diners. So our community has asked over and over again for more ownership opportunities in the neighborhood. We're a 80% renter-occupied community. We just really want to see our neighborhood as a place where people could gain a foothold, build equity. There aren't many missing middle opportunities or even condo opportunities in Salt Lake City, and I think lots of you are aware of this. But unfortunately, then on page 22 of the staff report, we read, Main Street Apartments brings much-needed market-rate housing and retail space to the ballpark neighborhood that is designed for single residents and families, so on and so forth. We would love to encourage developers to follow through with stated plans for affordable ownership or even ownership. We have examples in the neighborhood of when applicants for a planned development requested modifications to zoning requirements for a setback, for example, and built up to the property line. During the Planning Commission meeting, when asked why the project required a reduced setback, applicants stated that the missing middle housing types provided by the project would bring the price down and create more affordability in housing. These units are currently being advertised, and they meet no working definition of affordability anywhere, about $3,000 for a two-bedroom unit. So we would just sort of like to open a couple broader questions. The one being, is there any mechanism to address discrepancies between what's stated during a Planning Commission meeting or in a staff report versus what happens after a project has been approved? We'd also like clarifications in the project narrative. And furthermore, I've been told by planners or planning commissioners that owner occupancy isn't a qualification that can be considered when you're considering community benefit of a development or a project. And I would love to see that inspected further, not necessarily as a global consideration, but for specific neighborhoods who've stated this as an objective to get more stakeholders in the neighborhood, for example. Is this something that we would need city code changed, state code changed? We'd love to understand this more broadly, neighborhood, and maybe Salt Lake City as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on this application?
We do have a written comment or an email comment.
Do you want to?
Yep, I'll go ahead.
We'll set a 2-minute timer for comment.
Okay, my name is Jeff Sandstrom, a Ballpark Community Council board member and a homeowner to the north of the proposed Main Street assemblage at 1496 South Main Street. I am excited about and in full support of the redevelopment of this location and in support of the alley closure. My request to the council is to consider whether the redevelopment and zoning proposal are in harmony with the recently adopted Ballpark Station Area Plan, which we spent years on as a community. Page 13 of the station area plan that new development in the Main Street character area should focus on maintaining the scale, walkability, and bikeability of the neighborhood. Page 18 of the station area plan states that future land use in the Main Street area between Kensington Avenue and 1700 South should be considered for redevelopment into a medium density area that utilizes current building scale and massing to guide future development. New building in the area should be considered for redevelopment no taller than 3 stories with front doors on Main Street, stoops, and yards. I'd like to focus on those last comments, stoops and yards. If you look at the various properties on the west side of Main, from 1300 to 1700 South, there are 35 different parcels. None of these 35 are built up to the sidewalk except the old storefront at 1700 South Main. All recent development in this area, such as the 15 Main townhomes at 1499 South Main Street and the Moda on Main townhomes at 1570 South Main Street, have complied with the height, size, scale, and setbacks as commercial corridor zoning required and are compatible with the station area plan. We have appreciated those developments and our new neighbors that have come with them. If the council deems the zoning change appropriate, then I request that the council require a development agreement or stipulation on the zoning for setback compliance. That should be a requirement for any subsequent property owners as well. Thank you for your time. And then I feel like I should clarify that his email forwarding the comments states that these were previously submitted comments for the prior petition, the zoning change.
A prior petition on this same property?
When they applied for the zoning change.
All right, thank you. Because, yeah, today we're considering a plan development request, which does not go to the city council, just we decide on that. Anyone else want to speak on this item? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. I want to give the applicant an opportunity to respond to the comments offered during the public hearing if the applicant is here.
Madam Chair,
Is Cassie here? Yeah.
I would like to make a motion to move this off the consent agenda and to the regular agenda at whatever item the chair deems appropriate, at which time then an applicant could respond as normal.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner.
A second.
Thank you. A motion from Commissioner Berry to move this to the regular agenda and a second from Commissioner Scheer. We're going to vote on that motion. Commissioner Berry,
Yes.
Commissioner Christensen,
Yes.
Commissioner Scheer,
Yes.
Commissioner Krasik?
No.
I'll vote yes. So that's 3 votes to move this to a regular agenda position and 1 no, so it will be moved to the regular agenda, and I'll keep it in first position.
Wouldn't
So-
that be 4 votes, Madam Chair?
That is 4, yeah, sorry. Yep,
Okay.
that's 4 yeses and 1 no. Okay,
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025.
I'll second.
okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Christensen and a second from Barry. Commissioner Barry. Commissioner Krasik,
Abstain, I was not there.
Commissioner Scheer,
Yes.
Commissioner Mike Christensen,
Yes.
Commissioner Barry,
Yes.
and I also will abstain because I wasn't there either. So the minutes are approved for April 23rd meeting. Okay, we're going to go to the regular agenda now, and I'm going to move that consent agenda item, the plan development approximately 1518 South Main Street is our first item. So the planner is Cassie Younger. If you want to come up and give your presentation, introduce the project to us.
Hello. Sorry.
So we put things on the consent agenda if we don't anticipate that there'll be discussion, but if there is discussion, we move it to the regular agenda. So we'll treat this like a regular agenda item, and I will reopen the public comment if anyone still wants to speak on it, or if you want to send in an email. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for waiting. I'm Cassie Younger, Senior Planner on the 1518th Main Street Plan Development. Let's go over some background on this project because it does have quite a history. Back in 2022, these properties were rezoned from Commercial Corridor and R1 5000 to FBUN2. During that process, the alley was approved to be vacated but still remains to be purchased from the city. The applicant submitted a plan development application in March of 2023. So this application is vested under the zoning code from that time. And you will notice that the FBUN2 code has changed a bit since then. So all of the zoning code references are from March 2023. In September of 2023, this was scheduled for the Planning Commission. And then prior to the meeting, the property owner withdrew consent of that application. And then in March of 2025 this year, a notarized signature was submitted, allowing the application to move forward. And then, as many of you may have seen in the news, a few weeks ago, there was a fire on this property that burned down the Lorena Snack Factory. So the subject property consists of 7 properties along Main Street and Andrew Avenue. They were zoned FBUN2. Here are some photos from the property. The Main Street Motel exists on this site. The former Golden Dragon and now former Lorena Snack Factory, and then a couple single-family homes and the alley that was vacated. The project is proposing 241 residential apartment units that range between studio and 2-bedroom, and 1,137 square feet of commercial space along Main Street on the ground floor. They are proposing 232 parking stalls and include amenities like a gym, bike maintenance facility, pool, and a clubhouse. They were requesting the following modifications of zoning through the plan development, starting with facades over 200 feet, reduced number of balconies on upper floors, and then a few exceptions to Richard Street in particular, which are entryways 75 feet, ground floor transparency of 60%, 70% facade durable materials, and a build-to line of 50% at 0. So some of you may notice that a lot of these sound like design review requests, but at the time, all of these requirements were in the FBUN2 zoning code and not in Chapter 21A37, so they were not eligible for design review modification. So all of these requests are through the plan development process. Their first request for facades over 200 square feet. We'll look at Main Street first. This is the east facade. So you can see that the first 190 feet or so are made up of a mixture of brick and black fiber cement paneling, then transitions to a different color scheme of gray and white fiber cement. There's a high level of transparency, especially on the ground floor, with front stoops and balconies on the upper floors that help give interest to the facade and break up the length of it a little bit. The second facade on Andrew Ave is also approximately 289 feet long. And again, this has a similar pattern of transitioning from brick and black fiber cement paneling to a gray fiber cement panel with some stucco as well on this facade that helps create an image of 2 different looking buildings along this street. The second request is to reduce the number of residential balconies along street-facing facades. The code requires that all units on upper floors have balconies. And there are a few places on this building design where balconies are not included, particularly on this corner massing of the building on the corner of Main and Andrew. There's a lack of balconies on all of those units, as you can see here from the drawing. And there's a few other places on Richard Street, which I'll talk to in a minute, that do not have balconies for every unit. Particularly for this location, staff finds that this helps break up the look of the building, and so it kind of focuses that corner and makes it look a little bit more commercial, since there is commercial on the ground floor there of Main Street with the awnings, and that kind of differentiates the rest of the corner section from the rest of the clearly residential parts of the facade. So for the exceptions on Richard Street, there are quite a few of those requests for modifications because while there is a supposed public right-of-way on this area. In reality, there's just a church driveway that's closed off to the public, so this area of the street or parcel does not function as a public street and is not used as a public street. So they are really requesting that this is designed as more of an interior facade that does not have the same street-facing requirements that street-facing facades do in the FBUN2 zone. So that is why there's a longer list of requirements or exceptions and to modifications of the zoning on that facade, because there really is no public street there to speak of. And so this is the drawing for the Richard Street facade, which is approximately 225 feet long. It has only one public entry, 58% durable materials of brick and fiber cement paneling. Instead of a build-to line at 0, the setback is 4 to 6 feet on that interior setback, which allows for a private walkway down that property line. And while most of the residential units on this facade have balconies, there are a few on the end that do not. When this was rezoned with the council in 2022, the applicant was required to go into a development agreement, providing the following list of requirements in the proposal. And so that included things like a minimum parking count, which they have exceeded, a minimum number of square footage for commercial space, which they have exceeded, the number of 2 bedrooms, a bike maintenance facility, secure storage for bikes, the housing to be replaced, and the property to vacate the alley and consolidate all of the parcels. So while they're still working with Real Estate Services to purchase the alley and consolidate the parcels, the rest of the requirements listed in the development agreement have been provided. So plan development requests must meet the plan development objective. They are claiming that they meet the master plan implementation, which is a project that is consistent with the guidance of the master plan related to building scale, building orientation, site layout, or other similar character defining features. And 2 of the main goals that are repeated throughout the ballpark area plan are creating a dense urban environment around the ballpark and increasing the urban design quality in the neighborhood. And so we find that the ground floor, particular of this project with the front stoops, the high level of transparency and balconies and landscaping added to the setback and park strip really add to the pedestrian experience and the overall urban design quality in the neighborhood. The plan development standards are master plan compatibility, design and compatibility, landscaping, mobility, existing site features, and utilities. And we find that the project generally meets these standards by providing a dense urban environment that improves the urban design of the ballpark neighborhood, which are the main goals of the master plan. And its design is compatible with the newer development in the area that will set a pattern for the rest of the neighborhood as it continues to develop. And it adds landscaping and greenery to the area and provides housing in a neighborhood that offers plenty of transportation options. There were no concerns with existing site features or utilities at the time of the application. So staff recommends approval with the conditions outlined in the staff report.
Thank you. Is the applicant available to speak? Come on up to the podium or the. You have 10 minutes to make a presentation. You don't have to take all of that, but we'll time you.
Shoot for macOS. Open that. It'll do a few things. The program. When this stops blinking, you can then click it and it'll put it up on the screen. Thank you.
Maybe I'll wait to start, just so I don't start the clock prematurely.
Sorry, I should have just pulled it up on mine.
We used to do clarifying questions for staff at this point, so I think let's do that right now while the presentation from the applicant's getting completed. My question is, does the Richard Street, is it legally a road? Was it never legally a road, or what's the actual situation? I understand it's not used as a road right now, but.
Yeah. The response I got from the city surveyor was somewhat vague, but the answer implied that it's not a road, and that it was not built as one. But we're not totally sure.
My other question is so this project, the application was made while there was a different rule for FBUN2? Yeah. But the ballpark station area plan was in effect when this was vested. I don't know if you can vest under a previous station area plan, but the ballpark station area plan was put into effect in October of 2022, which is before this one was vested.
Yeah, I believe during the rezone process, it was still, if you said October 2022. So I know there was some discussion as to whether or not to apply the ballpark standards to the rezone, but it had, by the time of the plan development, been adopted.
Thank you. Any other clarifying questions for staff right now?
So the zoning was approved in 2022, but this application is not from 2022, is it?
It's from March of 2023.
So at that point, the zoning applies, that the FBUN2 zoning applies, and the design review for, okay, never mind, I get it.
When was the new FBUN2 rules? When were those implemented?
The design standards moved to the design standards chapter
Yeah.
in July of 2023, so just a few months after this application.
Okay.
And then, as you're aware, with the consolidation, it will be changing again to the MEU 5.
Right, which isn't backwards looking, right? They have the rules that are set in March 2023. Any other questions for staff right now? Okay, you ready?
I am. Yes, thank you. I'm James Alfondre with the development team. Keith with AE Urbia is our architect on this project. We're happy to be here and happy to present this project on this location on a very prominent corner in Main Street in the Ballpark neighborhood. We're very excited about where we've gotten to on this project and working with the city to make sure that we break up the facades larger than 200 feet in a way that continues to enhance Main Street as a walkable, bikeable, mixed-use, vibrant street that's so close to downtown. As Cassie has gone through, I just want to point out the retail corner is going to be retail. We're hoping for a great tenant to continue that momentum of this neighborhood as a 24/7 great place to live. We wanted a really strong corner, and we also were very careful or sensitive to the surrounding architecture and trying to bring some of that into this design. As we move down the streets to the south and to the west, as Cassie mentioned, we use different massings and roof lines to break up the building so it doesn't feel like one large, massive building. And then we also wanted to have a lot of transparency on the ground floor, including stoops, retail, and a lot of transparency to make walking by our building pleasant and enjoyable. We want to encourage people to get out and walk and enjoy all that the ballpark has to offer. The master plan of the ballpark talks about adding housing and supporting downtown, creating a mix of uses, including more housing and retail. So we feel like we are doing a great job in supporting the master plan and what the city's goals are for this part of the neighborhood. Again, you know, some more architectural features, a lot of differentiation and massing setbacks that, you know, again, help to break up these large facades. And it almost breaks them down into, or the objective was to break them down into smaller buildings. And then going through the neighborhood and getting inspiration for existing architectural details and applying those to the building is something that we spent a lot of time on and are proud of where we've gotten to. We're very excited to have gotten a recommendation for approval from the planning staff based on how our proposal helps implement city goals. The plan development modifications for the building length of over 200 feet and Richard Street. I will make a clarification. I am not a surveyor, but the tax assessor map and observing the current situation of Richard Street, that gated entrance into that parking lot is actually on private property. It's the trees that are between our property and that church is what is Richard Street. So there, we have these massive large trees in the middle of Richard Street. So there is no public access through Richard Street because Richard Street doesn't exist. And so, you know, even if the church unblocked their entrance to their parking lot, if any member of the public was to, you know, enter into that and behind our property, they would be trespassing on private property. So again, yeah, Richard Street is not a street. There's no asphalt, there's no pavement, there's no way to access down Richard Street. And again, we're really excited for the product we're putting forth. We have done a lot in the ballpark neighborhood. We love the ballpark neighborhood. We want to continue seeing it, you know, grow and adding more housing types and units. And adding more neighbors and hopefully local retailers, definitely retailers to the space to continue, again, making ballpark the neighborhood we all, you know, love and want to see continue the momentum that it has. Thank you. And I talk too much, but I'm sure Keith has maybe a comment or two he'd like to interject, or if not.
Ditto. No, it's been a pleasure to work on this project with this development team, specifically trying to tie in the architecture with some of the existing surrounding buildings, the older brick, and really emphasizing trying to make sure it's not doesn't feel like a massive large building. You know, as an architect, we get challenged a lot with city code, but not necessarily city code, but trying to do what's right for the community and for the city. And that's something we take pride in and something that we really do put a lot of thought and design into. So it's been a pleasure to work on this project, and I really do like the way that it's turned out, and I'm pleased.
Emailed comment. Does anyone else want to speak on this project? Okay, I'm going to close. Any new emails? No. I'm going to close the public hearing on this project. And then I want the applicant and staff and probably our attorney to kind of respond to some of the statements or questions that we heard during public comment. The first is, what is the rule about in what way can we hold an applicant responsible for statements they make in their application? Like if they say we're going to have affordability, or they say we're going to have ownership opportunities in the application, does that, or they say it at a meeting, like at what point do we hold them like hold them to, they have to make that happen? And does the development agreement in this case, have a part to play in that? So first of all, though, let's see,
Can I
were there any, yes, let's have the applicant, you can respond to what you heard in the public comment, but address it to me.
I'd like to clarify where we mentioned home ownership opportunities. I don't recall ever mentioning or suggesting that we would have home ownership opportunities here. I would also like to say, just as a general citizen of Salt Lake and where we are in our housing crisis, just because you're a renter doesn't mean you're a bad neighbor or you're not invested in your neighborhood. The fact of the matter is, with our housing crisis, more people are choosing to rent or don't have an option to buy, so are renters by choice or not by choice. And I think it gets dangerous when we talk about if it's not home ownership, it's not good for the neighborhood.
Thank you. Do you want to say something about those legal considerations?
Unless we have a development agreement that speaks to that, we do not have any contractual basis. It really goes to how you process the application and if you feel like the standards are met.
Okay. The development agreement was outlined in your presentation and also in the staff report, and whether it met or didn't meet the things that were required in the development agreement, I think.
I will also add that we've built for sale owner-occupied housing in this neighborhood. But again, I don't think it's a worthy discussion to talk about home ownership versus non-home ownership in this type of setting.
Thank you.
But
do any of you guys have questions for them?
It does say that in your application. It says by providing affordable options for housing ownership near the downtown core of Salt Lake, the project will generate a sense of place for tenants and their guests, as well as shoppers and diners. It does say housing ownership. I don't know whether that was a factor in getting I don't think it was, because this particular description is from August of 2023.
Well, thank you for pointing that out. I would say that that is a mistake on our end. When we initiated this and when we went through the rezone process and the development agreement, it was clear and we were very upfront of that this was going to be apartments with ground floor retail. So we have done for sale opportunities in this neighborhood before, and something could have been mixed up, and that definitely was never the intention. So and we've been clear up front. I don't know how that got into the application, to be honest.
But I think even if there was a slight discrepancy in the application, I do agree that the staff report is straight up about a residential apartment building. I mean, it's right there in the record, right? I mean, an application is one thing when that's that initial submittal. Things could still change, but when this was written and posted, it's absolutely clear that it's a residential apartment building. Just bringing home that point.
I have another question. Since there are somewhat mature trees on top of Richard Street, which I can see from the assessor's office, and you don't own that property, can you keep the trees?
We don't have any purview over those trees since they're not on our property.
Right, that's what I mean. Are you planning to?
We're planning on
to keep them, to protect them, because they'll be only 4 feet from your construction. I mean, obviously, construction's an issue. So if you keep them, that would be great. It would be an amenity for your, for people who are on that street.
We see them as an amenity, a very big amenity.
I have a few things. One, I want to follow up on the clarification with the attorney regarding not so much about homeownership in this regard, but the overall question of, in an application, if they don't follow through with those things, what are the mechanisms that we have to go back to them? I think a development agreement is one, but I've always been under the impression that any conditions that we place on an application are also binding to the end product. And then I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, Chrissy or Michaela, that if they are taking advantage of a community benefit, there sometimes is like a deed restriction for a certain community benefit here or there. So those are the three options that I know of: development agreement, conditions, and a community benefit stipulation that would give some teeth to whatever the application and approval is project, that if they don't meet those things, then that's when the city can go back in and go after those things. If they just say, oh yeah, we're going to keep trees, but it's never stipulated in any of those three items, then if they don't keep the trees, then there's nothing that we can do about it, correct?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So they are bound by the site plan. So when the planning commission approves, if they approve the plan development, you are approving the development plan, the site plan. So if they're making modifications to those, they would either need staff approval for minor modifications or coming back to the planning commission. If the planning commission does suggest a condition, that condition does need to be tied to a standard of approval.
Certainly.
Yeah, but you're correct that there are those mechanisms.
So I think that was somewhat in benefit for my mind, but also in response to the community question. So if we go back to this application now, one of my concerns is the exceedance of length on both Main and the whole project. Because I feel like I've seen many things in design that talk about breaking it up, and I think, oh, that'll be all right. And in the 7 years that I've been on here, I haven't seen one successful in actual real life of it not feeling just enormous. So I'm more leery of applications, any of them, that want to go that far over. 289 feet on Andrews, and 283 on Main. So I'm not necessarily convinced that it would not look like a very large building, especially given this corner is somewhat more compact, right, in its area and its visual impact. So one of my questions to you then is, if you are going to have to develop under the current FBUN rules for massing of length, how would you approach this project if you were not allowed to exceed over 200 feet?
Just to clarify, I could be wrong here. I don't think the question is you can't develop over.
No, that's a question you're asking us to give you approval for, is to exceed the 200 feet length.
It is to exceed the 200-foot length, but it is to break it up in such a way that doesn't feel like it's a 200-foot-long building.
If you do that, if you break it up in such a way that doesn't feel like that, I'm suggesting that's not what's happening. So this is my question to you. If you are not allowed to exceed the 200 feet in length because it's not broken up or feeling like it isn't a huge building, how would you approach developing this corner? Because you still have the right to develop this corner.
We would work with the staff to get an approved design that breaks up the block that's over 200 feet. Like, that's what we would do. And we've done it.
Yes, so I think you are fully capable of doing it and creating a very better project. I think that my concern is that.
Amy, let me ask, what would you do to break up a block that a facade that's over 200 feet? We have different material types. We have different window patterns.
I think the intention of that particular rule is to actually have two different buildings.
Yeah, I mean, then I guess we get into you're right, which I think that's probably something that I don't know if we're going to, like, is that worth talking about right now? Like, I mean, we've satisfied what the city requires to break up a facade that's 200 feet in length. If you don't agree with it not achieving that, then I would say provide us with some feedback, but nothing requires us to go and develop two separate buildings.
Can you point us to the rule or explain the rule about 200? I thought that the building could not exceed 200 feet unless we said it was okay. What's the rule?
So this request is asking for a plan development approval to exceed 200 feet. As Cassie mentioned earlier, now that would be through a design review request. But yes, you can exceed 200 feet. You just have to go through a process. And there's extra design standards on top of that to break up the building facade.
Are we the deciders of if that process is adequate, appropriate?
Well, you would be reviewing the plan development standards that are allowing them to make that exception. So
Okay.
if you believe that they don't meet those standards, you need to make that finding.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that now when there are requests for over 200 feet facades in the design standards and the design review process, there's a more specific section that addresses that request that says you have to have a push and pull of a building and, horizontal articulation and a little bit more prescriptive of to meet that design review standard. But the plan development standards are different. And so they deal with master plan compatibility, transportation and mobility, landscaping, and the ones outlined in the staff report. So just be aware of that.
I would say that we worked closely with the staff and took a lot of time to reduce the feel of this building. The nature of our blocks and our streets are we're dealing with really big parcels and really wide streets. And so a lot of times we face a 200-foot long facade. And look, it's subjective, though, whether you agree with us or not. I'm not arguing that. I'm not saying you need to like what we did, but we worked really hard to follow what the city wants to see to break up that facade. And we feel like we did a really good job of it.
Okay, I'm going to put a pause for just a second so that everyone gets a chance to look at the standards section of the report or the rules. So hold on just a second.
Madam Chair, I would just ask if we're going to enter into a discussion period or if other commissioners have actual questions.
If what?
We were going to enter into a discussion period, which we're not in now, or if the other commissioners have
Does anyone have any more questions for the applicant? We can ask the staff questions later for the applicant. Okay, so now we're going to move into executive meeting rules, which is where we talk and we can ask questions if we want to. Let me look at the standards. Someone can ask a question if you want to, but can you, Ms. Younger, can you point me to where the discussion on the length of the building is in your report?
I think the main place it's discussed is in the first to the objective and the master plan compatibility, because that's really where the the facade design comes into play, is that pedestrian experience, and through the ballpark plan.
What section is it?
Sorry, the objective A and then the first standard master plan compatibility.
It also shows up in attachment D of the FBUN to zoning standards, which is on page 52.
Thank you.
Yeah. So for the, yeah, there's not like a specific standard about that specific request, like there is in the design review that has really prescriptive standards.
I just want to check in with the commission. Is this the kind of titular thing that we have concerns of, or is there any other design standards that any other commissioners feel do not comply? Just to kind of know the depth of where we're at. Does anyone feel like there are other design standards that are not, or development standards, sorry, not design standards, that do not comply, or is this the real key?
Well, I feel like the other issues that they don't comply on are not concerning to me.
Okay.
The treatment of Richard Street is not a front-facing street, okay. Having a corner without balconies, okay. Obviously, the exceptions for Richard Street, I think, are fine.
Okay.
So that's what I focus on, or what are the exceptions they're asking for?
Okay, thank you.
I also plan to propose a condition of approval, if we do approve this, that they protect the existing trees that are over a 10-inch caliper on Richard Streets during construction.
Is that something we can require in that it's not on their land, that they protect, we can require that they protect neighboring trees? No.
I will have to take a look at that, but I don't believe that you have authority over somebody else's private property at this time.
It's city property.
Property, city trees.
Sorry, the city property.
Okay.
But basically, if there are trees on city property, there is a rule that you cannot destroy them, right? With teeth to that rule?
Sorry, say that again?
Yeah, there's a penalty for destroying trees on
Yes.
public property. Thank you. I have thought my thoughts, so if anybody wants to make a motion. Amy, I'm sorry, Commissioner Barry, I think the planned development standard C is probably where the scale of the building sits.
Yeah, I'm working through what this will mean. 1 second.
Just as a matter of precedent, I believe that we've had this discussion many times about, because our blocks are unusually long, and requiring people to build two separate actual buildings on half a block, and half a block, is 330 feet, is sometimes not possible. I think that in some, I can't remember, but I believe that we have set a maximum, absolute maximum, no matter, you can't go over for design, even for conditional use.
Is it okay if I jump in?
Yeah.
I believe that did come up so there are some amendments in the process right now,
right.
but they have not been passed yet.
No, I understand that. I'm just raising it as a kind of standard
Right,
of,
but it
of,
definitely
of,
has
of,
come up.
of a discussion we've already had that has and I believe that it's a maximum of 300 feet or something like that, total maximum, no matter what. No conditional use can go over, ride that.
Well, and I think that the only way to match the scale of the community is not to just build separate buildings. There are other ways to make the scale be more appropriate for the neighborhood besides just building 2 separate buildings. And if we don't think that this has achieved that, that's the condition, that's the plan, that's the standard. We're still thinking. This happens all the time.
Okay. All right, I move that the commission deny this plan development application because evidence has not been presented that demonstrates the proposal complies with the following standards. We have zoning standards of building length exceeding 200 feet. We also then have plan development standard A and C, which talk about, now I have to take my glasses off, that exceptions are not creating an enhanced project over strict application of the zone, and we find that both in standard A and standard C. That's my motion. Okay.
Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Barry. Does anyone want to make a second of the motion or do something else? Substitute, amend? Those are also choices. Can I ask a quick clarifying question? Procedurally, if we deny this request, what are the options for the applicant? Do they come in with a new application under the new rules, or what happens?
Yeah, they have the option to appeal.
Okay.
And then they could choose not to appeal and submit a new application. I think that's, Michaela, that's it, right? Yeah.
Is there a time limit do they have to wait for a year? That's not in this case, right? No. Okay.
We have 10 days to appeal.
Okay. Am I authorized to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Well, hold on.
Oh, sorry.
Can I? I don't know that I can make a motion. I can't. Okay. I would be more in favor of tabling it until we get the concern fixed, but I can't make the motion, so.
I think in order to do that, Madam Chair, we really have to give the applicant some guidance about what is expected in order to really understand, to really approve a building that is 280 feet long, or to say we're not going to do that and that it actually has to be 2 buildings, or at least appear 2 buildings with a parking garage or something like that. I mean, in the past, we have looked favorably on deep indentations in a building that really do give the appearance of being 2 buildings. But we have also looked at things that look similar to this too, which is that there have applications of different materials and different depth of things like with balconies and so forth that break up the facade. If we were to table it and ask them to bring it back, I think we would have to give them some guidance.
Thank you. I think you're right, but I can't make a motion anyway, so think about that.
This is an issue that I think we have all been struggling with, and I would love to figure out a time to talk further about this with planning staff, about how to figure out how to thread this needle. So if we can set aside some time to be able to talk through this. This is an important thing that I think a lot of us feel very strongly about, and I think we need better. I would like guidance on how to address situations like this. That being said, I'm ready to make a motion. This is a motion for PLN PCM 2023-00245. Based on the information presented and discussion, I move that the commission approve this plan development application as recommended by staff.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Krasik, and a second by Commissioner Mike Christensen. Any discussion or other activity to the motion? Okay, we're going to vote. Commissioner Krasik,
Yes.
Commissioner Shear,
Yes.
Commissioner Mike Christensen,
Yes.
Commissioner Barry.
No.
I'm also going to vote no, but it passes with 3 votes, so the plan development is approved. So,
Can I ask a question?
I think not right now.
Because
We can have a discussion with the staff
Please.
at another time.
Yes.
Thanks.
You.
Thanks.
okay, it's just,
No, stop. Stop.
I mean, the staff has approved it, and so I don't know what feedback they're going to give us, but I would love to hear why you didn't approve it. Is there a way to get?
They did approve it. They did
No,
approve
no,
it.
I know, but the Commissioner Barry,
Okay.
and Commissioner Burrows.
It's done.
Is there a way to know
Your
why
mic
they
off.
didn't approve it, just so we can know?
We'll have more discussion, and I moved the discussion about, I made a note on open forum that we would like to discuss building length and massing and that kind of stuff in a future meeting, okay? And that will be great for the applicants to listen to that discussion as well. Okay, great. Next item on our agenda, it's item number 3. It's a continuation of the RMF 35 and RMF 45 multifamily zoning district merger text and map amendment. Yeah, that's a lot. Please introduce yourself and give us your presentation. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Aaron Barlow, senior planner here in the Salt Lake City Planning Division. Give me just a moment to pull everything up. My computer went to sleep during that presentation. Just a sec. I stayed awake, don't worry. Okay.
We're going to be passing out some attachments, even though we emailed if you're having issues with Laserfish right now, pulling up some comments from the ECC, that 77-page document, we also emailed it to the Planning Commission. But we have backup paper copies. Thanks.
Okay, I am ready whenever you've gone through the materials.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for allowing me the time to go over this once again. I'd also like to thank the community for the additional feedback we've received over the past few weeks on this proposal. So we'll just dive right into it. For some context, here is the map of the affected properties here. This proposal is to update the RMF 35 and RMF 45 multifamily residential districts, making a number of changes to the proposal. So basically, in summary, it was to update lot width requirements, lot area requirements, design standards, open space requirements, create a form-based zoning district, and a number of other things that are listed in the staff report and the attachment 4. So at the last meeting, the Planning Commission heard public comment and listened to staff and recommended. They tabled the proposal and recommended staff look over a few things and make some modifications. Specifically, they asked staff to keep both the RMF 35 and RMF 45 districts. Initially, staff had proposed to keep it as a single RMF 45 district, combining the two. The proposal's been modified to keep those two districts as they are. And then they also asked staff to consider if individual zoning changes might be appropriate for specific cases, maybe to a different zone, a smaller one like RMF 30, or if they needed to be upzoned from RMF 35 to RMF 45. They also asked that we continue the review, the block-by-block assessment of the properties, and we sort of did that as we reviewed properties for rezoning in one direction or another. Okay, so what did we exactly update in this proposal? We separated the RMF 35 and RMF 45 zoning districts. We are proposing rezoning some properties from RMF 35 to RMF 45, and then provided some clarification on unit bonuses, and then there were some other minor tweaks really relating to references to RMF 35. We had removed all of those initially and had to put them back in, and a few other things really small that are really not substantive. So first, keeping both the RMF 35 and RMF 45 zoning districts under this proposal, most of those regulations actually will remain the same, with lot area, lot width requirements, design standards, open space requirements, all those things that don't have to do with height, they're essentially the same. The only major difference is for two specific building forms, for multifamily and non-residential. Those were proposed to be 45 feet in the proposed RMF 45 zoning district. Now in the split districts, in the RMF 45, they'll be 45 feet. But in the RMF 35, they would only be allowed to go up to 35 feet, keeping the height at 35 for all building forms except cottage courts in the RMF 35 district. So staff did go block by block and review properties that maybe were appropriate to be rezoned. We started with the easiest thing, which was, well, first I want to go over some language. So upzoning versus downzoning. Many of you might already be aware of this, but it's also for the public. A downzone is a change to a more restrictive zone, usually allowing less density or fewer houses per acre, and also usually a lower height limit, a shorter building. And an upzone is a change to a less restrictive zone, allowing more density, allowing higher buildings. It's funny, down is more restrictive, up is less restrictive. Anyway, so there were some issues that staff came across when reviewing properties to be downzoned. The first was a question of equity. First, there really is a net loss in total housing that might come up through downzoning these properties. We kind of go over that in the staff report. It can lead to less housing on a lot if it gets redeveloped. It can take away investment opportunities for homeowners, especially for those who do not have the time or means to undo a rezone by the city. And it could create properties with nonconformities, making them too dense or too tall for that zoning district. Also, under the mixed-use consolidation, one of the key guiding principles was to avoid taking away development rights from properties, and we've tried to kind of carry that through this process as well. Okay, the first area that we did for rezoning, which is kind of the easiest, we looked at future land use maps in individual neighborhood plans. This is just one example. We looked for, in these neighborhood plans, there's a, 6 or 8 within the city, and they all have different designations for different types of properties with different names, different density recommendations, but we tried to keep it to something that was like medium high, high residential, or mixed use. If it was RMF 35, it should really go to RMF 45. One example is here on 8 East Hillside Avenue. In the map here, you can see that it was recommended to be high density residential, but it's zoned RMF 35. On that property is actually a 7 or 8 story apartment building. So it's not really changing anything on the site, but it is bringing it more into compliance. And there are multiple properties like this throughout the city, actually 23 you can see listed there, and we're recommending those be changed. And those are easy because they're in adopted future land use maps by the city council. So, we're just continuing policy.
Can I ask a question about that? So your recommendation when you do the 35 to 45 upzoning, most of these 23 properties are already developed?
It's different for every single one. Some have these tall buildings like this one on Hillside.
Okay.
Others may not, but
Okay.
it really was what was adopted by city council. It was a city policy at that point. Something that was adopted or passed by the Planning Commission. There was a robust community engagement process, and the city council eventually adopted that, even if they are, in some cases, over 20 years old. The next step that planning staff took was to consider the transit and walkability of these properties. We looked at 5 different factors, the proximity to fixed rail, to major bus lines, and then the walkability really is a 10-minute walk to jobs, schools, and groceries. And each of those colors, the maps are included in the staff report, sort of show that range of things. Here on this block, you can see some of the properties meet 2 and some meet 3. Once we identified properties that had a high transit score, 4 or 5, we looked at their character and considered things like the size of the building, how it was massed, where it was located, what the setbacks looked like on the site, what was the general context, was it more multifamily, were there more single-family houses, was it commercial? Also the building types in that vicinity, were there more apartments, was it mostly a smaller urban house things? And then also the historic significance of sites, and whether that's in a local historic district, a national historic district, a local site, a national site, or even just buildings that have some architectural significance on a block. Not every building is listed, but it might have some significance to the community and to the character of the street. Some challenges that we faced, when going through this, there were a few roadblocks that really came up. First was the inconsistent determinations by staff. There are competing factors, the age of building, the type of building, property owners, the vulnerability of a neighborhood that made determinations inconsistent with one another. We may have had one block where we said this should change, and we go to another with a similar walkability score, and we're having an entirely different determination based on who owned the property, what was on there already, the implications of changing that property. Another issue that came up was that really became subjective when we start looking at character assessments. It's easy with a transit and walkability score. You can say it is this many miles away, this many minutes away from a site, but it becomes more difficult when you say, what's the historical significance of this property? Is this property, if we rezone it, really it leaves planning staff to pick winners and losers in a sense. And in a lot of ways, it's beyond the scope of this project. This is not a comprehensive neighborhood planning process. This is a change to a few zoning districts. Now we have to do this piecemeal because of staffing availability, and if you try to do a comprehensive one, that's a very big process to change all of zoning. But these zoning districts, if they are passed, can be tools to be used in the future. If, say, there is an update to a neighborhood plan, they can then say, well, in these areas, we really think it should be RMF 35 or RMF 45 based on what the zoning district, what those regulations are in place there. They'll match them up with the future land use designations. And that's a more transparent way to go about it, to let the community say, we think these areas need to be this way, we want these areas to be like this, and it allows the city council to kind of adopt that as policy, as opposed to a decision based on factors that planning staff kind of put together based on a recommendation from City Council or from the Planning Commission. And another thing we can probably address here is like, well, then why would we go to ARMA 45 in the initial proposal? By doing that, it was more of a uniform application of the proposal, and planning staff did not have to differentiate different properties based on characteristics that they, again, had to kind of put together out of nothing. And that's why we've really kind of stuck to either adopted policy or we're going to keep it how it is in this proposal. We did include those maps in there, however, just for your reference, to look at those and see like, oh, these neighborhoods look like they've had a lot of transit investment, or they're very walkable, and they might warrant, a look in the future. So like I was saying, we're just limiting upzoning areas to those designated in the future land use maps, and then utilizing the general plan and future land use updates for in the future, using general plan and future land use updates for neighborhood scale and surgical zoning adjustments. So just a few other updates. With the bonus units, we clarified that if, say, there are 4 units within 2 buildings, they would still qualify for that 4-unit bonus. Before, it was like 4 units in a single building. But if someone has a project with 2 buildings, 2 units in each, they would qualify for additional bonus units. We also require restrictive covenants for those bonus units so that those buildings stay in place and there's a good legal hold on those if something goes south. I also wanted to go over public comments just a little bit. Since the public hearing, the comments have essentially been the same from supporters and those opposed to the proposal. Supporters cite the outdated regulations that have limited growth in the community. They point to the proximity to transit, jobs, and schools of these zoning districts. They point to the low quality housing that's sort of existed in these neighborhoods because there has not been any change. The school closures because families are not moving into the community, and pointing to the limited supply that affects affordability throughout the city. We went over this last time, but you can see the housing ladder. When there are not new housing stock being built at those higher incomes, pressure goes downwards and increases the cost of those homes that would typically go to moderate and lower income families. Opponents cited neighborhood character, changing those issues with historic districts, worries about displacement of existing residents, parking challenges, and the short notice of this proposal. But I did want to address that this is not the end of the process. And this proposal, as it's been updated, is a reduction. It's a whittling down of that initial proposal, so the impacts would be less than what was initially proposed. So that brings me to the timeline of the proposal. At this point, it's under your review, and whatever recommendation you provide, we would then transmit it to the City Council because of what's on their docket right now with the budget. The earliest they would review this would be in July, so there is still time for the community to provide their feedback. You can send them to planning staff, and we'll pass them on to City Council staff. We'll be able to discuss them with City Council members, do all those things that are still happening here. And so staff is recommending that the Planning Commission recommend approval to the City Council and rezoning those 23 properties identified by the future land use maps, and as needed, allow staff to make minor tweaks, clerical adjustments to the ordinance if there's issues with grammar, and then make technical map boundary adjustments when parcel lines aren't lining up quite perfectly, getting those legal descriptions perfect so that we're not creating a property where the zoning goes through the middle of a lot. And so that's the end of my presentation here. And I'm happy to answer questions, probably after the public hearing, but I'm here.
Yes, since we don't have an applicant, I'm going to move questions to after the public hearing. I'm going to open the public hearing for this item. We have at least one speaker for Community Council, 2 speakers from recognized community organizations. So Esther Hunter, if you want to speak about this presentation, and then Judy Short, assuming you're speaking on behalf of your community organization. You'll be next.
Hi, I'm Esther Hunter from East Central. Boy, I'm echoing. I'm not sure what you have that we sent in. We were very late in sending things in today. Do you have my cover letter or just the big detail list of everything? Okay. Oh, great.
And they've been forwarded that. I'm just saying this for the record.
Thank you for doing
too.
that. We appreciate that. We went through a detailed analysis, and we wanted to thank you for giving us the extra time to actually do that. We looked at all of the properties that are RMF 35 in our area. And part of our big pitch has been that East Central is a unique area. I know everybody feels that way about their area, but it is unique because of the patchwork quilt of zoning that we have already had. And for years, we fought it. But what actually happened through having so much mixed zoning is that we actually had developed what exactly the city is saying they want, which is all kinds of different housing next to each other, side by side, walkability, the ability to age in place. And so what we did was we actually put some of these examples in the pictures. If you look at page 2, we've got examples of houses next to apartment buildings. If you go to the next section, you see the amount of parcels that we already have that are developed. If you go to the next one, you see all the mid-rise apartments that we have. You go one more, there are many that are zoned RMF 35 that are actually critical community services. Everything from car repair shops to churches to stores, that if they were actually rezoned and developed to 45, we would actually lose critical services in the neighborhood that we need to maintain the walkability. And then another example was this adorable row house that is zoned RMF 35, that if somebody made that an RMF 45 and really developed it, we would lose the very thing that we're saying we want with the RM 30 zoning. On the other hand, we have a whole series of land, and I just put 4 on here, that is in our area. And again, we're right at the key place of transit and between downtown and the university, major employment services, where if we could zone them RMF 45, we would have some immediate possibility. In our overall analysis, we did over 280 parcels that are zoned RMF 35. Of those, 132 were already developed into multi-family complexes with not just mid-rise. We had 21 parcels that were needed community services, and we had 8 that were significant historic properties like St. Paul's Church. We recommended that 98 of the properties remain RMF. We said on here 30, but with the changed RMF 35. This gives overall out of our area 25 parcels that actually could add units now. So our main point was that our area needs to be surgical. A blanket change to an RMF 45 for all the 35s would actually potentially destroy the very thing that's organically developed. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next, I have Judy Short and then Jeff Bear.
Judy Short, Sugar House Community Council. I have to say, with 238 in East Central, I bet Sugar House has 30 or 40. Aaron would probably know. It's a very different number. So I tried to zero in on the changes in the code that I think might be problematic. I like the addition of the design standards. These are always helpful, but all materials need to be of high quality. We have all seen buildings that disintegrate quickly with the schlock materials. If some are high quality and some are poor quality, it would seem to me it would look just as bad as if it were built with all high quality materials. I'm not sure what I think about reducing lot size requirements, except that if it means that all the 49.5-foot lots would now qualify for redevelopment, that might be a good thing. Clearly, not all of those would work, but it might allow a good number of them to be more useful in terms of increasing the number of dwelling units. The 4-foot setbacks are a problem. My 1898 house has about 30 inches of side yard on the west. Under these new rules, the parcel next door could presumably be 45 feet tall. The eastern wall would be windowless per the fire code, and there would be 6.5 feet between the two buildings. Many of the parcels in these zones are in the central city or avenues, where many buildings were built before zoning setbacks existed, like my house. You need to include something for appropriate setbacks when very tall buildings are next to short ones. You should probably require the setbacks to be larger, 5 or 6 feet. If you widen the setbacks to 5 or 6 feet, then you can have windows on that. Previously, with the 4 foot, you can't have any windows. Incentives for keeping existing units is a good thing. That hopefully will result in more naturally occurring affordable units, because little money may be needed to renovate them compared to building an entirely new unit at today's prices. You should require that the existing unit remain affordable. Parking per unit would remain at 1 space per unit. This should be a minimum everywhere. We don't have an adequate transit system to make not owning a car a valid option in many cases. Families with children are leaving the city because they can't find units with a parking place. And you should put in some controls. Much of this does not require going to the Planning Commission, according to soon-to-be approved or already approved rules. That means a staff person can grant approval. Make sure there are controls so the staff person can't be talked into cheap materials, fewer or smaller windows, no off-street parking, and narrower setbacks, because in case you haven't noticed, most residential streets in the older part of town have no street parking during evening hours. Many of the houses don't have a driveway, and as you know, the city's about to make it easy to close alleys left and right, so the poor souls who have access to a garage from the rear may lose that parking. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jeff Baer. Will you tell me what community organization you're
Liberty
speaking
Wells.
for?
I represent Liberty Wells. So this is specifically noted to encourage infill. And Daniel Paralek, the architect who coined missing middle housing, has specifically spoken out against slot homes as infill in existing mature neighborhoods. Salt Lake City calls that a sideways row house. It's where you tear down one house and you build 5 units in a row on that narrow lot with minimal setback. He specifically called out, again, those should not be built as infill in mature neighborhoods. In 2018, Denver outlawed slot homes as infill because after 20 years of nothing but negative feedback from the community, they recognized that those are detrimental to those mature neighborhoods. So they outlawed them in 2018. My concern is spot rezoning to RMF 35 and 45. And that's already happened. In 2022, across the street from me, property zoned R1 5000 was rezoned to RMF 35. Every single one of the neighborhoods, which is a single-story house, and the community council all spoke out against it, and it was rezoned to RMF 35. Last year, there was a slot home built in Ballpark. It has a 23-inch setback from the adjoining property, which is a single-story bungalow. On the second and third floor, there are huge windows. And so the property next door is on display 24/7. They have no privacy. So again, our concern is spot rezoning in existing mature neighborhoods. And because of that property that was rezoned across the street from me, Liberty Wells published a vision of what we see as density in our neighborhood. We're not against density. We understand the need for density, but we want gentle density. That means ADUs, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, cottage courts, not these huge 3-story buildings plopped down in the middle of nothing but 1-story homes. That's completely, I mean, it was mentioned here, neighborhood scale. That's completely out of scale with the existing neighborhood. That property also didn't meet the transit requirement as far as distance. And we're also a local historic district. All of that was overridden. So past is prologue. We're concerned that this will be used, again, to spot rezone properties and negatively affect our neighborhoods. And if you want, I can share the full Denver report. They have a full report outlining why they took that action. Also, in 2018, it's surprising me, in 2018, I shared that with the city council. And at that time, the city council had me meet with the director of planning. And he told me directly, we're working to minimize slot homes. And that went out the window. So anyway, that's our concern.
Thank you. Next up, we have Cindy Cromer and then Lynn Schwartz.
The proposal now bears little resemblance to the one presented to community organization. That's a good thing. The monster height of 55 feet is gone. The ill-conceived concept of merging the two zones is gone. It is definitely less bad. What's left to fix before you send it to the city council? The older portions of the city were built before the first zoning ordinance. All of my buildings are older than the 1927 ordinance. 9 of them are built on the property line or within inches of them. 9 of them are built on the property line or within inches of it. It's an abomination to think that someone could build 4 feet from one of my buildings with a mostly blank wall. The fire code would restrict openings to 15% of the surface. That's on the handout I passed around from the IBC. My tenants should not have to look at a blank wall or have an intimate experience with a mural. If you only increase the setback to 5 feet, the requirement for openings could be 25%. That's a huge difference. The shift is highlighted in your handout. I sent you my comments that I also made to the City Council about setbacks. You should have received today the fabulous analysis by the Central Ninth Community Council regarding setbacks and open space. The photographs tell the story better than I can. We are talking about infill, about how to add housing around viable buildings, which probably provide less expensive housing than new construction. And the favoritism showed to low-density zones in this proposal is elitist snobbery. Why should a design be different because it's next to a building in a single-family zone, which may or may not be a single-family residence, although that should be irrelevant. My buildings appear to be single-family residences. They were built as single-family residences, converted to multiple units. I am offended by the text, which indicates that somehow they are less worthy of respect as the city becomes more dense. My buildings already have the density the city is seeking.
That's time. Thank you. Next, Lynn Schwartz. Are you representing a community organization?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Holding a public hearing on a significantly revised proposal with the staff report available less than a week before the hearing is not reasonable for an issue of this complexity. It gives the impression that the Planning Commission is rushing this through while trying to limit public engagement, which is surely not intended. You cannot change the character of neighborhoods with incentives to greatly increase density and also, quote, retain neighborhood character and preserve existing units, unquote, at the same time. The requirements for bonus units are troubling. They are exempt from minimum lot, off-street parking, and open space requirements. Probably the worst part of the proposal's incentives is the lack of displacement mitigation. There is no requirement that the existing unit remain affordable to receive bonus units or that the bonus units be affordable. This will directly encourage gentrification and loss of affordability. For example, you have listed 2673 Preston Avenue, a limited income senior housing project, as a candidate for rezone to RMF 45. To encourage redevelopment and lose many affordable apartments is so antithetical to Salt Lake City's desire for affordable housing that it boggles the mind. If this is the kind of redevelopment this proposal is supposed to encourage, you should completely rethink it.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on this application or this project? Go ahead. Please give us your name and you'll have 2 minutes to speak.
Hello all. Whoa, sorry. Hello all. My name is Cooper Peters. I'm a resident of the Avenues, a couple blocks north of the proposed consolidation. I have lived in downtown for the last decade, and I have a few comments in support of the, well, I guess it's not a consolidation anymore. Yeah, for the zoning change. I was going to initially say something about to the property owners, but I'm going to scratch that, about supply and demand, but I'm going to scratch that. I support the change because the valley's population is growing during a housing crisis, and as we grow, we need to densify closer to our city's core downtown. This is where our resources are. This is where our hospitals, our grocery stores, our university, our biggest university in the city, and other important businesses are. And this is where we need to have our density, in my opinion. And also, this change isn't enough. I believe that from Smith's going west and up past the hospital, we need to zone a little bit more densely. This is because the LDS hospital will probably be revitalized within the next decade, or I believe it'll probably be revitalized within the next decade, and I find it kind of irresponsible to have such low density around such an important resource to the city. Not only that, we have another resource, Smith's in the Avenues is another big resource, a grocery store, obviously. And yeah, that's that. Lastly, my last point, I understand this is the 11th hour for this proposed change, but going forward, I would love to see more dynamic zoning changes that adapt to demographics, markets, and more. For example, if there were things in the code that prompted reviews or small changes in the zone. Anyways, thank you. That's all. Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead. You'll have 2 minutes. Please give us your name.
Thanks. My name is Mohit Rupale. Good evening, commissioners. I'm here tonight to express our strong support for the proposed updates to the RMF 35 and RMF 45 zoning district. These changes reflect a clear commitment to solving Salt Lake City's affordability crisis with smart, balanced tools. For decades, the RMF 35 and 45 zones have promised moderate density housing, but delivered mostly single-family housing and large apartments. Very little of the missing middle that our neighborhoods desperately need. Outdated lot size and parking rules have made it almost impossible to build small, walkable neighborhood-scale housing that everyone seems to want. This proposal goes a long way in fixing that. This proposal is about the options that our neighbors need to make a life in our city. We're especially excited about the introduction of new building types like cottage courts and sideways row houses, and the incentives for preserving existing homes while gently adding more housing. These are the kind of options that allow seniors to stay in our communities, young families to find a foothold, and our city's workforce to live near their jobs. And the focus on walkability, transit access, and equitable development citywide is deserving of recognition. Thank you for your thoughtful consideration of this proposal, and to our city staff for working so hard to get this policy right. We urge you to move this proposal forward with a positive recommendation to the City Council. We've had multiple months and multiple review meetings where this has gone through review, and I feel like it's just giving opportunities for people who are against it to just keep delaying it because they don't want changes to happen to our city, which we desperately need. So I urge you to take action today and give approval to this proposal by city staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Do we have any new emails?
We do have some email.
Okay, we're going to time them. You have 2 minutes per email. Just a second. Okay.
I can start with the first one. You got the timer ready?
Yeah.
Okay. This is from Mary McConaughey. I am opposed to anything that would allow more than 10 stories in Sugar House business areas at this point. I think that we need to be sensitive to creating canyons in some of our more neighborhood connected areas. Sun and light are important to thriving.
Thank you.
I will read the other one. Dear Commissioners, on behalf of the Central City Neighborhood Council, this is an email from Jenny Starley.
You have to get right up to it, McKenna.
Let me get right in there. We submit the following comments regarding the proposed consolidation and amendment of RMF zoning designations, particularly RMF 3545, and how they may impact our neighborhood. The CCNC is a recognized Salt Lake City Neighborhood Council whose mission is to advocate for the well-being of residents and small business owners within our boundaries. We strive to ensure that all land use policies are equitable, sustainable, and reflective of community character and long-term viability. The Executive Board of CCNC, with input from community members, raises the following concerns and recommendations. 1, context-sensitive design and historic compatibility. Central City includes one distinct historic district with established patterns of development. We strongly caution against applying a one-size-fits-all zoning approach that may erode the character of these areas. Massing height and setbacks must be responsive to adjacent buildings and neighborhood context. We urge the Commission to retain or enhance zoning tools that allow tailored standards, especially in or near historic overlays. 2, setbacks, stepbacks, and privacy buffers. Proposed zoning updates must require setbacks or stepbacks from lot lines when adjacent to single-family homes or low-scale residential buildings. This is critical to prevent blank facades, preserve privacy, light, and access, and avoid creating unsafe or inactive spaces. Where glazing is restricted by building code, design accommodations, such as recessed balconies, should be mandated. 3, open space standards. Current landscaping requirements are often satisfied by narrow, unusable strips. We recommend adoption of minimum dimension standards and usability criteria to ensure that. Thank you.
Keep going. Community organization, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a good time.
And this email came in at 6:04 p.m. 4, ground floor residential and public realm activation. We're concerned with lack of privacy and activation at the ground floor and new RMF developments. Units are frequently flush with the sidewalk leading to blinds drawn and windows and unengaging streetscape. CCNC supports requiring modest elevation changes, stoops, or forecourts to create a transition between the public and private space. Number 5, material standards and long-term maintenance. We support zoning that emphasizes high-quality, durable materials and attention to facade details. Recent developments show inconsistent adherence to this principle. Strengthened standards for exterior materiality will ensure that new buildings contribute positively to neighborhood character over time. 6, microunits and livability. While CCNC supports diverse housing options, including microunits, several recent buildings have included 4-story walk-ups with no elevations and minimal amenities. These raise serious concerns about accessibility, long-term livability, and building maintenance. We recommend incorporating basic livability standards for all high-density housing types. 7, parking and mobility balance. CCNC supports transit-oriented development and reduced dependence on personal vehicles. However, practical needs for parking, especially for employees, visitors, and older residents, must be addressed. We request greater support from the city on striping and enforcing on-street parking, enhancing alley access for off-street parking, implementing shared and flexible use parking strategies. 8, historic district safeguards. Zoning reform must explicitly protect historic districts within Central City. Increased allowable heights or density should not override protections meant to preserve the cultural and architectural fabric of these neighborhoods. We request clear language in the ordinance that upholds historic preservation goals. We appreciate the city's effort to simplify and modernize zoning codes, and we're committed to working collaboratively towards zoning that benefits all Salt Lake residents. We respectfully urge the Planning Commission to adopt amendments that balance growth with quality, equity, and context. Thank you very much. Jenny Starley, Vice Chair-elect, CCENC Central City Neighborhood.
Thank you.
And then we have one more. This is from Yvonne Martinez. Thank you for the opportunity to provide feedback on this ordinance. It is a lot to absorb so quickly, but it seems that the changes are not as arbitrary. It's just upzoning all RMF 35s. I like that the new map shows which properties will be able to go to 45 feet versus 35 feet based on the neighborhoods and what structures would fit into those areas. I only have one property in my neighborhood that would fall into this new zoning that would be able to go to 45 feet in height. In this situation, the buffers would be much better for the existing neighbor to the north, since the current building looks to go right up to the property line. The owner was looking at developing this parcel a few years back, but was unable. Thank you. And her address is 1983 South View Street.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on this application? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing for the Planning Commission. There'll be another public hearing for the next group that listens to this application. I wonder if the planner wants to take a minute to respond to some of the things that you heard in the public comment period, or at least that you were taking notes, that you heard them, that you noted them.
Yeah, I was going to wait for you to bring them up or address them, but I can go through a couple.
Go ahead.
I'd be happy to respond to a few things too, if you don't mind. It's difficult for planning staff after we've had this proposal out there and had public hearings and been incredibly transparent about our goals, to be able to respond on the fly almost after hours to some letters from our community councils. We're happy to take them in, and I know Aaron's been taking notes and I've been taking notes as well, but I just want the Planning Commission to take note of the multitude of statements and comments made about this proposal that may be quite new tonight. Thank you.
Right. Understood. If you would like to speak to some of those, I think we understand the position.
Okay. The first is the Denver slot home issue. We looked into that report and specifically what were the issues and what they modified in 2018. That really had to do with the units and how they face the street. In Denver, they did not require units to face the street on these side row houses, and we have consistently required that since we introduced that building form with the RMF 30 when it was passed in 2022, but since 2017 when it was initially initiated by staff. The next item, the 4-foot setbacks. We're not limiting our setbacks to only 4 feet. That is something that allows flexibility for developers to, it may improve quality of life for residents on the ground floor to have those windows on that, that side facing property. And if it's a 4-foot setback, they can either sprinkle it, allow extra protections, or set that back another foot, and they're able to have those. What we want to do is really create that flexibility, because there are cases where it's an infill project and that 1 foot of area on either side, especially if it's like a 33-foot wide property, can really limit that development or lead to demolition of that property on the side. That's where we sort of came to with the 4-foot setbacks on the side.
And can I also just speak to the historic note? Like, the Historic Landmark Commission has taken a look at some of these lots as well that are rather narrow, and it takes quite a design team to try to meet those historic standards next to existing 100-year-old properties. And I think that we have the talent in this city, and the Historic Landmark Commission has actually approved sometimes these facades with different types of materials. So I just wanted to note that as well, with the overlay protection.
Yeah, there were some comments on we are requiring these step backs next to designated landmark sites, but not within the local historic districts. And like Michaela said, the Landmark Commission does exactly that. Another question was on accessibility and micro units. On the accessibility issue there, when there are a certain number of units in a property, accessibility is required for a percentage of those units according to ADA standards. And that is required through building code. To get a building permit, you have to meet all these things. And we have inspectors that are trained on these things and require it. So allowing more units on a lot actually encourages that accessibility. And we addressed that in our initial staff report. Chrissy covered that at the last presentation. And then micro units, this is part of the reason why we proposed 4 stories. You lose some development potential when you're cutting it down to 35 feet, leading to developers to squish those units into a tighter space. Allowing that extra floor expands the area, can create larger units, allow for family-sized units on a site that may not have been possible with 35 feet. But we do acknowledge and recognize the Planning Commission want us to split that in half, and that's what we've followed that direction and done what we can to make this still follow the goals that we're proposing and within that framework that you've established for us.
If I can address one of the comments as well about there's no affordable housing component to this, I just wanted to reiterate that that is not a goal of this proposal. This proposal is to fix 2 zones that have essentially been stuck in time because they are not functional and then only 4% of the lots have been developed. Affordable housing, while is in many city plans as a goal, we have a division that is dedicated to providing affordable housing. That is not the goal of this proposal. The goal is to fix these zones and allow more development and more housing in general.
And can I also speak to some comments about protecting historic properties? We have the overlay. There is specific language about how the overlay essentially trumps underlying base zoning districts. So we do feel very comfortable about any properties that may be zoned RMF 35 or 45 being protected through that process.
Thank you. Do any commissioners have any questions for staff?
I have a few. So, Aaron, this is just a genuine curiosity question. I'm not trying to make any other kind of insinuation from it. But when we talk about development rights and downzoning to whatever, I feel like, do we ever consider, it seems like we get stuck on height, right? If we reduce height in this example from 35 to 30, that we've taken away development rights. But have we really looked at the holistic part of those rights, meaning increasing allowed density within 30, so that that seems to be a real restrictive right that limits it. But if we adjusted that, what I'm trying to get at is, do we really look at all of the different ways in which we can increase value in development rights in a zone and not tie it solely to height?
Yeah,
Right.
I get what you're saying there. And I've kind of covered a few of those. The RMF 30 does have a higher unit per square foot requirement of 2,000 square feet versus the 750 that we're proposing. If a property is down, and that could be changed, and it may need to, but it's not within the scope of this proposal. It's not something that we can really adjust without turning around and starting the whole process over again with the 45-day and the public engagement.
Well, I remember at the very beginning, your initial, work session, I brought that up. Like, why aren't we reviewing allowable density requirements that we might be able to keep certain zones but increase the development potential? So it's not like it's a new thing I'm bringing up, and it's related to then what you stated in the staff report on your presentation about, like, and I'm not suggesting we should downzone to RMF 30, but that we seem to be stuck in only looking at height as a development right.
Oh, yeah.
And this is not a new theme for me. So I don't know about it exceeding the scope so much as it was an effort for me to like broaden how we view our ability to increase different housing types and different developments in a way to satisfy the goal, because the stated goal from the very beginning was to promote more variety of housing types, not specifically density, increasing density, but that's part of it, right? So that was, I mean, that's just an overall question that I think we're limiting ourselves on, but
Another piece on that is with the cottage court development, we did reduce the minimum lot area for that to sort of encourage that less common building form and create a greater variety. You know, they're equal in the RMF 30. The other issue is the setbacks. We really wanted to push to 4 feet because that does expand some more development area to promote infill in the rear of a property. If the tighter you make that buildable area, the harder it is to use existing space on a site. So setbacks is another one. They're more restrictive in the RMF 30 district as well, because they're usually located within single family neighborhoods, or at least the space between moderate apartments and those single family neighborhoods. Or should be, at least. You know.
Okay, so I have another question. Of those 23 parcels that you identified to move from 35 to 45, and I looked at the map, but I don't know every parcel of land in the city. So my question is, of those 23 parcels, are any of those a mix of housing types now, or was it, well, it wasn't, if it was just a parcel or if it was a neighborhood. If we're just looking at the parcel, then that's one thing. So is that how, are those 23 solely parcel driven, or are they in like a broader area?
They're really just based on those future land use maps within the adopted future land use maps in the Capitol Hill, Central Community, Sugar House, West Side. Yeah. And there are little clusters of properties that we included in there that would be, you know, an opportunity, especially on the West Side where they're near these nodes for recreational, community, and regional amenities. And so with having those little nodes there, that is, you know, an opportunity for new housing types in that area that may have been single family. We did avoid a few just because of concerns with displacement, specifically those properties we identified in the last meeting that we said maybe go to RMF 30, and because we're splitting it, RMF 35 is still appropriate there. Putting it to RMF 45 might push that to displacement, but you know, for the most part, when looking at those, it was really just what does the policy say, and we adjusted it according to that adopted policy. It wasn't a subjective decision.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Some of those future land use maps are pretty old.
That's true, and we're working on updating them.
I mean, really outdated in the sense that, you know, there could be much more density, you know, that would be appropriate for those places if they have a, you know, 20-year-old future land use map.
And we agree with that. That's definitely something that we looked at and wanted to do in this approach. The issue really came that we were, as planning staff, kind of selecting who would be upzoned, who would remain the same. And that really is a process meant for the neighborhood planning and for, you know, the Northwest community and for Capitol Hill and Avenues. That's happening in the next year or so. We'll start moving into that process. And if, you know, if we can continue that ball rolling, it may happen in other areas, but I'm not the one to say that. But it is a process that is much more transparent, is a process that includes much more robust visioning, includes the community in there. You get outside organizations. You're well aware of the process for the master plan. And it's just better than what we were doing, where we sort of created criteria to get this moving through. And establishing criteria is also sort of a fraught concept, right? How do we measure what should be rezoned, and who gets to decide what is measured? And that's something that should be left to the visioning and master plan process.
I have just like a very quick clarifying question and then a broader topic. In the public space, private space conversation. So I just want to frame a scenario of we create a cottage court you keep the existing house, and then you have 3 little tiny bungalows behind that house. Cool, nobody sees it from the street. You added 3 houses to the neighborhood. Wonderful. So the clarifying question is, those units are required to have either public space or private space, and that private space needs to be 150 square feet and can't count as the front yard setback. So if those are all behind the initial house and facing sideways from the initial house, then that then becomes the front yard? Or is that front yard exemption only for that main building that faces the initial street, blocking all of those houses from view?
That is a good clarifying question. The intent was along the main public street. And we can make that slight tweak to maintain that in there.
If it was just slightly more clear, because I wasn't sure if that was, because it would be lovely for those people to have a little bit of extra space in the front of their house that's their private space, but I don't want to require it. And so if that is their private space, then that's, just ensuring that's clear in the full document would be great.
Can do that. It's just a few words.
Yep. And then kind of my broader topic. So the Ken Gardner Policy Institute, this is partly for the public and partly for other commissioners. The Ken Gardner Policy Institute, which is the leading institute on housing, suggests that we need over 120,000 new units in Salt Lake City, in the state generally. So that's the whole state. Every time that we incentivize, we're at Salt Lake City, we are crushed by a housing shortage right now. And every single unit that we prevent from being built here will be built eventually, but it will be built in Eagle Mountain, out in the middle of nowhere, destroying public land, destroying farmland, and requiring every one of those people to travel an hour to get to our one metropolis. It's not like we have a current system where we have tons of great, incredible cities that are all really close to everyone's jobs. Right now, we have one really big metropolis that has the majority of the kind of energy and economic force for the entire state. So unless we incentivize more kinds of things like this in the metropolis, we are taking 2 hours a day from every person who wants to work in Salt Lake City, but is required to live elsewhere. And that is on top of all of the ecological damage that happens by all of the emissions from their cars and all of the roads that are required to be constructed. So while this may have some growing pains for our communities, there is such an important need for this kind of housing specifically, and it really is saving not just the people here, but just the people throughout a lot of the state. So that's kind of my broader topic issue of kind of the framework why I really care about this kind of a thing. And then secondly, as our Ballpark Community Council Chair suggested, housing for sale is often difficult in these big apartment buildings. There's a number of market reasons for why that happens, and I am not a perfect expert on all of it, but my understanding is that the smaller units that are being talked about in this proposal are more likely to be for sale than massive apartment buildings. And people needing rent is good, but also smaller, low-density apartments that are filling into our neighborhoods, having a higher likelihood of actually being able to be for sale is also a net positive for our community. So being able to adjust this kind of a thing so that the zoning that was meant to be multifamily decades and decades ago can actually be multifamily is critical. And so that's kind of my kind of big picture on this. And so I am eager to hear other comments.
I would just jump on that as well and connect it to something that's happening to us right now. The I-15 improvements from 4 South to Farmington did not come out of nowhere. That is, again, connected to what you're saying. If we don't build housing units here, they end up in Hooper or, West Point, in areas where there's farmland. Those farmers get pushed to places like Summit County or, even farther south. And then you have issues where people start fighting with the Bureau of Land Management because there's less space for everyone. So it's happening right now around us, and making those connections. I love it. I could spend hours talking with you about this, so I'll stop.
Thank you for speaking the truth.
So, Madam Chair, can we go into executive?
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you. I have to say that I'm not a fan of the sideways townhouses either. I don't think they fit really well with a neighborhood. On the other hand, townhouses in particular are one of the building types that are much more likely to be sold rather than to be rental. And so if we were to do something about that particular housing type, I think that one of the unwanted results of that might be that there would be much less housing for sale. So that is I think it does make a difference that we have a sort of building on the front that faces the front of the street, that has the front door on the front of the street, and I do think that makes a difference. So that is something that we may need to revisit in the future, but I think it's maybe perhaps different than the case in Denver. I am very much in favor of this proposal, and I think it has evolved really well. I'm really happy that the planning staff took into consideration the things that we talked about. I think there may be many more parcels that could be upzoned to 45 in the city. And of course, as these neighborhood plans evolve, that's something that will happen as a part of those neighborhood planning too. But I want to just say that this, for the most part, keeping things at 35 instead of making all of these parcels into 45, I think has been has made a big difference. It may reduce the amount of housing, but I think it actually makes a big difference in how this housing fits into neighborhoods.
I hope it does lead to more housing. A lot.
I also am grateful for the changes that were made since the initial introduction. And I'm very supportive of this and echo the comments that have been made by my fellow commissioners. And I'm ready to make a motion.
Well, hold on. Let me outline the possible outcomes
Gotcha. Go
of
ahead.
our day. I love to do this. We can make a positive recommendation to Salt Lake City Council. We can make a negative recommendation to Salt Lake City Council. We can continue to a date certain with or without continuation of the public hearing. I guess we could add specific changes that we'd like to see, kind of conditions if you want to see something specific sent with our recommendation.
This is a motion for PLN PCM 2024-01388. Based on the information presented and discussion, I move that the commission recommends that the city council adopt this zoning map and text amendment as recommended by staff.
Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Christensen. Any second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Scheer. Thank you. Any discussion or other action on the motion?
If this may be out of order of operations, but I am interested in discussing slightly the option of retaining some of that old material of that higher intensity. I still think that we need more housing, and I would be interested in discussing that with other commissioners, but also would accept their kind of criticism and feedback on that idea. So I'm not sure that I'm fully ready to vote yet, but if we're past that stage and we need to vote, then we can.
I don't know that we're past that stage. You can make a substitute motion. You could make an amendment to the motion. Does anybody else feel like they understand this position and want to make a motion to it?
I would vehemently oppose that at this point for this particular project. I think that is very counter to exactly what the goal was stated from the very beginning of this project and this consolidation. So that would be my position on that.
I just want to remind everyone that there is a motion on the table, and if you want to open it up for discussion, then you need to basically backtrack on the steps that you've taken and stop the vote and go back to open discussion.
So we can take an
we can't
alternative
discuss a motion?
Yeah, we can have an alternate motion if
motion
Commissioner
or
Krasik
a
wants to do that.
substitute motion or an amendment to a motion.
You can discuss the motion, but you can't discuss in
Then-
further detail.
Oh, yes, I understand that. Yeah, no, I think that
But we also
Then
can.
I-
we can
then if I can,
Commissioner Berry's comments were discussing the motion, actually, so, yes.
So let's take a minute. If you need a minute to craft a action on this motion, you can have it. So we're going to do that. We're going to take a minute to craft another action on this motion. And you have time.
okay.
I can help if you need.
So if I craft a alternative motion, then it is, so I just state it as normal and say with the approval with the amendment of.
You can do an amendment to the motion that's already been made, or you can do a substitute motion. You can completely replace the motion that's on the table, or you can add something to it.
I would like to try to just do a substitute motion. And this motion is for PLN PCM 2024-01388. My substitute motion is that we revert to the RMF 45 multifamily zoning merger, and I would look for a second.
Okay, we have a substitute motion suggested by Commissioner Krasik. Do we have a second to that substitute motion? No second.
As
Okay.
I thought, which is fine.
Okay,
At
thank
least
you.
I tried.
Thank you. So we'll go back to the original motion by Commissioner Christensen, and which was seconded by Commissioner Scheer. Any other action on that motion? Okay, let's have a vote then. We'll start with Commissioner Christensen,
Yes.
Commissioner Scheer,
Yes.
Commissioner Krasik,
Yes.
Commissioner Berry.
So before I make my vote, I want to state that any disagreement I expressed with staff had no reflection on your work. Your work has been really good on this proposal from the briefing to now. I appreciate all the effort you put to take our considerations back to the table. This has been a longer process than probably many in the public appreciate, and there have been at least, this is the third iteration of this proposal. So I want to commend your work on doing this, and I think it is a much better proposal now than it was before. And I am very happy to look at the fact that a stated goal, which I have now said multiple times tonight, was to promote a variety of housing types. And my stated view that we also need to preserve the variety of housing types that we have existing. And I think we've gotten to the point where we do that better than the initial view of consolidation. So I just want to point those out as I give you my support, and I vote yes to moving this on to the City Council.
Thank you. And I also will vote yes. So thank you. We'll send this to the City Council with a positive recommendation as written. Thank you. The next item, I want to go back for just a minute to outline that we would like to discuss building length decisions and massing and that kind of stuff in a future meeting. We can hopefully discuss that in the open forum, or you can give us a training. Is there anything else that we want to hear from in the open forum in the future? Do we need to discuss more if height is the only development right that we consider, or if we need to consider other development rights? You can think about that for next time and bring it up next time if you want to. Okay, thank you. And then with that, we're adjourned until the next meeting, which is 2 Wednesdays from now, which is the 28th. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Elmo's daddy taught him that when he has a big feeling like being frustrated, humming a song can help you feel better. Love your mind.